Hey everybody, Fishman here, and welcome to another video. This is the first video I posted in quite some time where there isn't going to be that little annoying hum in the background. The temperature here is quite comfortable today, and I don't have to have a fan running while I'm editing this video. And that is just so nice. It's been a long, hot summer, and it's actually wonderful just to have a comfortable day. Now, this video here has come about for a couple of reasons. First off, you remember the Daphne project, of course, and that one annoying aquarium. The one that wasn't drilled, the one that wasn't hooked up to the overflow system. And of course I made a couple of videos about getting that all straightened out. And for about 2 seconds while I was doing that, I was thinking, finally all my tanks are hooked up. And of course, there's these 10 here. And I figured, well, I was in the process of doing that sort of thing. I might as well hook these up and then I'll be completely done, because then all the tanks, even though these aren't running yet, all the tanks will be hooked up to the overflow system and I won't have to worry about that anymore. And then the other reason is, as I mentioned in, I think it was the last video, I want to hook up a sink on this side of the basement. This is where all the fish tanks are, and I tend to do lots of little finicky things with tanks from time to time. I'll skim a bit of water off the surface, or I'll take a turkey baster style thing and pull a little bit of mulm off the bottom. Things that don't really require a bucket. So I have two options currently. I can take that small amount of water and take it to the other side of the basement and pour it out. Or I can just set a bucket beside where I'm doing my work and gradually fill it up and hope to remember to go and empty it before it begins to smell. And as you can tell by the way I'm saying that, there's been a time or two where I've done some work here and I've gotten onto another project and I've forgotten about that bucket, and yeah, it can smell up the fish room quite easily. So what I want to do is I want to hook up, I'm calling it a sink, but you'll see as we go along it's not really going to be exactly like that. But with that hooked up to the overflow system, I won't have to do any of that anymore, and I won't have to worry about remembering to go empty that bucket. So this sink, I want it to have a couple of characteristics. First off, I don't want it to have any kind of fixtures on the bottom. I've done these before, where I would take a couple of bulkheads like these things here, and then I would put one in the lathe, and I would machine it down to, well, basically the closest I get is about 1/8 of an inch. And then I would use that as an attachment at the bottom of any kind of, well, a tank or whatever. But you can't drain it completely. So what happens is there's a little pool of water down there. It's not much, but again, that could cause some issues as far as smell goes. So I don't want that. And the other thing is I want to be able to hook up a number of different things to this. I want to have possibly a screening system where I can actually have different sizes of screens, because all my tanks have scuds and well, cherry shrimp and tons of other things in there, and it'd be interesting to be able to filter some of those out. And I actually really don't want any snails and duckweed to go down into this and end up causing issues. So those are going to be features I want to work into it. So what I've decided is, as you'll see while I get to near the end of this video, I found a piece, while I was doing all my renovations and cleaning, I found a piece of 4.5 inch Schedule 80 PVC pipe. And that's what I want to use to hook this up. And you can see right here is, these are two inlets for the system. First, the bottom one's going to hook up to the overflows for the bottom row. And then the very, very top, not the second tee, but the actual top of all this is going to be where the top row is going to feed in. And then that last remaining hole, the one that's on the far left right now, that is going to be where the sink's going to hook up. And what I'm going to do is I am going to plumb that in, so it's going to feed out to the front here. And then I'm going to machine a aluminum bracket, and it's going to attach to the uprights for that stand, just to give it an extra rigidity. And the other thing I want to do is I have some 1/4 inch PVC plate that's 1/4 inch thick, and it's been sitting in the shop for quite some time. But what I can do is I can do the same process I've been doing with acrylic. It's actually easier to machine than acrylic. And I can round that out to 4.5 inches, leave a 1 inch hole in it, and then also machine a bushing to fit in, so it'll fit in an elbow, an inch and a half elbow here. So that's going to give me a completely flat bottom sink, and that way it'll drain completely, and I won't have to worry about any extra smells and that sort of stuff. And that is my plan. And is the reason why I'm really happy I found that 4.5 inch Schedule 80 offcut. 4.5 inches, first off, is a really good size to fit in the lathe. And also, for those of you not familiar with Schedule 80, it has a really thick wall. It's in the neighborhood of about 1/4 inch. And that gives me an awful lot of material to work with. First off, I can put it in the lathe and get a nice true flat surface that is thick enough to hold a really good weld. Now, I've done a lot of welding with acrylic, and it's not really as important with acrylic. But as you can see, this is pretty much what I'm doing here right now, is welding. Welding with PVC, and in this case ABS as well. What you do is, there's a solvent. It's acetone based, and in that acetone base is a bunch of PVC dissolved in it. And what happens is, the same way with methylene chloride, it dissolves the walls on both sides of the joint, and then after it evaporates, the PVC that is in solution solidifies out, and it bonds the two sides together. It is not as strong as an acrylic weld, and therefore it's always nice to have a little extra material. And the other reason is, once this is in place, well, before I put it in place, actually, before I glue everything in place, I plan on sticking the opposite side, the open part, into the lathe, sticking out from the lathe, sorry, and I'm going to bore it out. I have 1/4 inch of material to work with, so I can take enough material off so I can, in the future, with that same offcut, I can cut pieces off of that, and in this case, turn down the outside of it so that it will fit snugly into this. And that will allow me to put in different size strainers, all sorts of stuff. And that is something I'm going to plan on doing for lots of future builds. Now, the reason why I'm showing you all this glue up here, besides giving you something to watch while I talk, it also illustrates how complicated you can make an overflow system and have it still function properly. Now, this is not normally how I would plan to do these things. If I were like planning this fish room, completely from scratch, all of these would have been put in together into one initially, and then that would be it. It'd be like the other side where it is just the one rack. But because this has been done in bits and pieces and over a considerable amount of time, sometimes you end up having to fit things in. And this is pretty much a really good example of how complicated you can get it and still have it all look like it means to be where it is and have it function. And there you go. This is a bunch of tanks, and they're all hooked up to the same overflow. Obviously, you can't run them all at the same time, and keep in mind that one hole that you see there is where the sink's going to come out of. But it does work, and it does work well. And now, the only thing I would mention when you're doing this sort of thing, as you saw when I was doing that last clip, is do it in sections. So that way you can have a section all welded up and ready to go, and then you only have to attach it into the existing one, the hub. So you don't have to actually put each piece on one at a time, because if you do that, you're going to end up with a gap, or it not working quite well. And when you're doing it this way, it's best to have it in, like I said, in sections. Now, this is the piece of Schedule 80, the 4.5 inch pipe. And I cut off a piece, and you can see the saw actually gives a really nice finish to it, but this is much better. This is obviously turned down a lathe because I want to do a little bit of machining on this, because I don't do an awful lot of machining with PVC. So I just wanted to stick it in there and make sure that I can get a good finish on it for starters, and it works perfectly fine. It actually machines an awful lot better than acrylic. So these are exactly the same as if I was using acrylic, except now, of course, you can't weld or glue acrylic to PVC. So this is going to be how the bushing system is going to work. The big plate is going to be welded to the main pipe, and then the little one on top of that, and that is going to get welded onto this. That's all going to be for the next video for this. But I wanted to show you at least the initial steps of here. I wanted to show you the welding process and how good a fit you can get with this. See, once this is welded in place, it has to actually dry for a number of days. It does take an awful lot longer than acrylic in that sense. Acrylic even I would leave for at least 12 hours, but this is I'm going to leave for a lot longer than that, because I'm going to put this in the lathe afterwards, and I'm going to take off any little bit of glue that might seep out, and I wanted to make it look reasonable. And also, of course, I need to bore out the other side of this. Now I'm just using this piece of acrylic as I turned it down the lathe just to give as a space holder for when I'm doing the glue up here. It's not going to stay. So this is, if you can imagine this thing flipped over, this is the sink, and this is where it's going to sit probably about halfway up the bottom row of the tank, the lowest row of tanks. And once it's all welded in place, I mean, this will all become obvious as time goes on here. As you can see, I put an awful lot of material on here, and that is pretty much the main difference, I think, between when you're working with acrylic and when you're working with PVC like this. You need extra glue, and it sets up pretty fast, but it does take an awful lot of time for that inner acetone to evaporate and give a really solid weld. So you can see there's a little bit of ooze there, and that is going to be machined off on the lathe. No reason to do it because it's going to be a hidden joint, but I'm going to do it anyway just to show you the process. And actually a lot of that is going to, on the next video for this, will be me doing that as well. So that will set up quite fast. And now the next thing is, of course, I got to do the exact same thing with this. Now it's difficult not to have a bit of seepage with this. I'm going to try and do my best here because it just doesn't seem right to just be really sloppy with it. But I am going to paint on a fair amount. Make sure there's enough. I don't want any gaps, and because this is on the lathe, it is going to be easier to do in one sense, and that is it's going to pretty much have 100% contact with the plate, because there is like I said, it's machine true. And all I'm going to do now is just going to stick that on top, and that's pretty much it for today, because this has to cure for quite some time before I'm willing to risk it in the lathe. And as always, please leave lots of comments. Let me know what you think, any suggestions you might have as well. And if you feel so inclined, a like and or a subscribe will be greatly appreciated. So as I said, this is going to take a couple days to cure, and that means it's probably most likely not going to be up for the Sunday vlog, but it's not really part of that sort of thing anyway. But I will have, hopefully, the rest of those tanks plumbed, and I have some other information and news for the Daphne project as well, and some other stuff. So there'll be plenty for Sunday anyway, and I suspect I will get to this for Wednesday. And then, of course, I have all those other projects I'll be working on at the same time as well. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video, and bye for now.